They thought your silence was emptiness, a hollow room with no echo, a soul too timid to speak, too fragile to fight back. But what they never understood is that your silence was never surrender. It was observation. It was calculation. It was patience wrapped in pain, watching, remembering, collecting every scar like currency. They spoke over you, mocked the quiet, mistook stillness for softness. But now the silence is gone, and in its place stands something they cannot control, cannot mute, cannot erase. You were not sleeping, you were storing. And today, the very silence they took for granted becomes the echo that haunts them. Because, when the quiet ends, truth begins, and nothing is louder than that. Your silence was never weakness, it was a warning. They watched you sit in silence and mistook it for fear. They saw your still eyes, your restrained words, your unshaken posture, and thought you were defeated. But they were wrong, so very wrong, because your silence was never weakness, it was warning dressed in calm. It was the quiet before the avalanche, the pause before the final blow. You didn't speak because you were uncertain. You didn't stay quiet because you were powerless. You stayed silent because you knew. Some storms don't roar until they must. You were giving them time to see their cruelty, time to correct their course, time to stop writing wounds into your spirit. But instead, they mistook your peace for permission. They danced in your quiet like it was theirs to own, forgetting that some of the most dangerous people in the world never raise their voice. Just wait. You observed while they paraded their arrogance. You listened while they built towers of deceit, thinking you'd never challenge them. But silence, when chosen, is not submission. It's strategy. It's a slow build towards something unshakable. And now, as the silence breaks, they will feel the weight of every unspoken truth you buried to protect the very people who betrayed you. You weren't quiet because you couldn't speak. You were quiet because you chose not to destroy them, until they made it impossible not to. That's what they'll regret. Not just losing your voice, but losing the version of you that once offered them peace. You offered stillness, you offered grace, you offered the chance to heal quietly. And when they discarded that gift, they awoke the one truth they never wanted to face, that your silence was a gift they didn't deserve. And now, the voice they tried. Silence is the one that will outlive their lies. There's a difference between a wounded soul and a watching one. And you were watching, weren't you? Not as a victim, but as someone cataloguing every moment, every word, every betrayal. They thought they had you pinned, but what they never understood is that people like you don't fight to be loud. You fight to be precise, and now you will not scream. You will not beg, you will not rage, you will simply speak, and the very world that dismissed your silence will stop to listen. Because when the silence finally ends, it's not revenge that follows, it's reckoning. They fed off your quiet until you became a storm. They thought your silence was nourishment. They thrived in your quiet like parasites, feeding on still water, sipping slowly from your self-control, draining it drop by drop. You gave them no resistance, not because you had none, but because you were testing the limits of your own mercy, and they mistook that mercy for weakness. They grew bold under your restraint, louder in the vacuum of your peace, crueler with every moment you refused to bite back. They built their confidence in the echo of your silence, not realizing it was never meant to be permanent. Because what they didn't understand, what they never even stopped to consider, is that you were not a calm person. You were just calming yourself. You were holding back something deeper, darker, sharper. They thought you had accepted their behavior. They thought they had broken your will. But in reality, every silent day was another step closer to the edge of something irreversible. While they bragged about their control over you, you were becoming someone else entirely, someone they won't know how to handle. Because people like you don't explode out of nowhere. You evolve, you shift, you simmer, and when you do finally erupt, it's not a display, it's a transformation. They pushed and pushed because they assumed there was no consequence. They believed your silence was infinite. But silence is not infinite. It's a fuse. And the moment it runs out, the blast doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't send a warning. It simply levels the ground beneath those who thought they were safe. And now that's where they stand, shaken, confused, afraid of the very force they helped create. The quiet one is no longer quiet. The soft one has become fire, and the ones who fed off your quiet can't swallow the sound of your truth. You don't need to scream to shake the world. You just need to speak after being silent for too long. Your voice now isn't just sound, it's the collapse of everything they built on false confidence. You gave them peace, they gave you pain, and now you give them the silence of your absence and the storm of your awakening. They will regret the way they misused your quiet, because they'll never again find safety in your presence. You were the calm they never deserved, and now you are the consequence they never thought would come. The storm isn't coming, it's already here, and it wears your face. When you rise with memory. When you finally stand up after the silence, after the betrayal, after the long nights of asking, why me? You don't rise empty-handed. You rise with memory, and that memory does not forget. It does not forgive what was never repented for. You carry with you every word they used to belittle you, every moment they twisted your kindness into a weapon against you, every instance they dismissed your pain, as if it was too small to matter, but it mattered to you, and now it matters more than ever, because your comeback is not just a return. It's a reckoning layered with all the memories they thought you buried. You didn't forget. You simply waited. You waited until the time was right, not for revenge, but for clarity. You waited until you could rise without hate in your heart, but truth in your hands. And now that you have, you carry a strength they can't comprehend, because it wasn't born from power, it was born from survival. They remember the version of you that stayed, the one who forgave too quickly, who gave second chances too easily, who tried to love through the breaking. But the version of you standing here now is different. This version has seen enough to stop apologizing for their discomfort. This version remembers who was silent when you needed them loud, who stood back when you needed someone to stand up, who looked away when you were breaking down. You rise not just with dignity, but with detail. They may call it bitterness. Let them, because people always label memory as bitterness when it doesn't serve their narrative. But this is not bitterness. This is awareness. This is strength with eyes wide open. They will see you now and wonder why you changed. But you didn't change. You evolved. You were always capable of this. You just weren't willing to become what they pushed you to be until they left you no choice. And that's what they'll regret most, that they didn't just lose the version of you they knew. They created the one they now fear. You're not here to make noise. You're here to be heard, not to hurt, but to remind. And everything you say now will come from a place they never reached. Truth forged in silence, powered by memory. You rise with facts they hoped you'd forget, with calm they can't disrupt, with strength they can't measure. And the next time they speak your name, it won't be with arrogance. It will be with caution, because they didn't just lose you. They awakened you, and no one forgets the moment the quiet one stood up, carrying every truth they tried to bury, ready to be heard, and unwilling to ever be erased again. Truth has a voice, and it sounds like you now. There comes a moment, quiet yet unshakable, when the truth no longer waits in shadows. It steps forward, it breathes through the cracks, and in that moment it sounds a lot like you. Not the version of you they once silenced, not the one who swallowed pain to keep peace, but the one standing now, calm, clear, and undeniable. You don't need to raise your voice to be heard anymore. You don't even need to convince anyone, because the truth, once awakened, doesn't ask for permission to exist, it simply arrives. You are no longer the echo. You are the origin. The words you speak now aren't coated in rage or wrapped in revenge. They're precise. They're cold with clarity and hot with years of swallowed injustice. And that's what terrifies them. Not that you're angry, but that you're right. They thought they could rewrite your story by silencing your side. They assumed your silence was acceptance, and they built their image on the lie that you had nothing to say. But you did. You always did. You just waited patiently, quietly, until your truth didn't need an audience, only a moment, and that moment has come. You're not screaming for attention. You're speaking to reclaim your own reflection. And every word you now let fall carries the weight of every time you chose to hold your tongue for the sake of peace. But peace at the cost of your truth is not peace, it's imprisonment. And you've been freed. They will try to discredit you. They will call you dramatic, call you cold, call you unforgiving. Let them, because those who benefited from your silence will always fear your truth. You're not telling stories. You're revealing facts. Not to get even, but to get honest. This is not vengeance. It's revelation. They wanted you to remain a character in the narrative they wrote. But now you're the author, and your voice is no longer a whisper. They just can't drown it out anymore. It cuts through their comfort like a blade of light. They may cover their ears, but they cannot unhear what's now been said. You don't speak to destroy them. You speak to liberate yourself, and in doing so, you liberate others who are told to stay quiet, to keep secrets, to bear pain in silence. Your voice is no longer just yours. It becomes a door for others to walk through, and they'll try to close it. But it's too late, because once truth finds its voice, it never goes quiet again. It may tremble at first, but it will not fall. And today, that voice, the one they tried so hard to mute, rings louder than all their lies combined. It's not noise, it's justice, it's healing, it's memory, it's power, and above all, it's finally yours. Regret always comes late, but it stays a long time. They didn't see it coming, the weight of their own choices. At the time, they thought nothing of the silence they broke, the loyalty they discarded, the heart they treated like a disposable thing. They laughed in your quiet absence, thinking your departure meant defeat. But regret has its own timing, and it never arrives when they're standing tall. It shows up later, when they least expect it, when the noise has faded, when the spotlight's gone, when they scroll past someone who sounds like you, or sit across someone who reminds them of what they lost. That's when it hits, slowly at first, then all at once. And the silence they once celebrated, now it haunts them, because regret never screams. It lingers. It shows up in the cracks of their daily life, whispering, "You shouldn't have let them go like that." They'll smile in public and break down in places no one sees. They'll replay old conversations, wondering if it was the moment they rolled their eyes or dismissed your pain, or when they said nothing while others hurt you. Regret doesn't ask for understanding. It just stays. You were never asking for too much. You were asking the wrong people, and now they'll come to understand that. Not because you made them pay, but because life has a way of echoing back the value of what we once took for granted. You didn't need to scream. You didn't need to curse or throw their name into the fire. You simply walked away, and in doing so, you forced them to face the truth of who they were without your silence protecting them. That's the thing they'll never admit publicly, that they were stronger when you were near, more grounded, more centered, because what they thought was silence was really grace, and now that it's gone, all that's left is noise that doesn't satisfy, people who don't understand them, and moments that feel too shallow. Regret will come quietly, but it will settle in deeply. It won't ask them to apologize. It will just remind them every day that they lost something rare, not because it ended, but because they broke it, and now you've moved on, not with bitterness but with freedom. You've become untouchable, not because you're hard, but because you're healed. And they will see that healing in everything you do, in your smile, your silence, your peace. That's what they'll regret most. Not just losing you, but realizing they had the chance to do it right, and chose wrong. Regret is patient. It will follow them into relationships, into quiet nights, into the mirror, and no matter how far they run, one truth will echo back louder than the rest. They didn't just lose you, they lost the only person who stayed silent when they could have spoken and shattered everything